It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, Scott Luton, good afternoon. Welcome back to Supply Chain Now. Got a great show teed up here today. On the episode today, we're talking with a supply chain entrepreneur that is driving innovation in the transportation space. So stay tuned for what is sure to increase your supply chain innovation IQ. Quick programming note before we get started, you can find Supply Chain Now wherever you get your podcasts from, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. We'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. So let's dive right in. Let's welcome in our special guest for today's show. We have Daniel Burrows, CEO and founder, XStream Trucking. Daniel, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here.
I know you are putting a lot of stuff into this week, right? I think it may be 5 days long, but it might feel like 15 days after Friday at 5 p.m., right?
It's supply chain, right? You got to get it all in a row, back to back, and then somebody looks at the calendar and there's a slot, so that gets booked too.
I love it.
But I'm happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here in Atlanta. I know you're here for a conference, and we were very opportunistic to have you sit down and tell us all about yourself and XStream Trucking. You're really doing some innovative things in that space, which we're going to touch on momentarily. But before we get there, Daniel, like we start with all of our guests, let's get to know you better. So, Daniel, tell us about yourself, including a couple of anecdotes about your upbringing or your education or what have you.
Well, so I have you might hear in my accent, a slight accent. I was born in Baltimore, but actually grew up about half my childhood in the UK. So I've always lived with one foot in either continent.
Okay.
I think that's always helped me look at things from a different angle because I've always lived in different environments and went to different types of schools, and I think that's always been a great part of my upbringing. So studied physics, really enjoyed that, specialized in energy actually, and then I learned the amount of contribution to energy that the supply chain and transportation in particular contributes to. So later in my career, I focused more on that.
Physics, that's above my math pay grade.
It's above mine too. It hurt. It hurt. I tell you, it was an Imperial College physics degree is a lot of fun, but it you work hard and it makes you feel very dumb. But then eventually you get there, and I was so glad I did it. I don't think I've done anything as hard since.
Really?
Yeah.
All right. So, and I also liked something you shared there, a variety of environments that it seemed like that made up your upbringing. I bet that that degree of diversity and different thinking and different environments in different countries, how does that impact your worldview and your degree of creativity and how you approach problem solving and whatnot?
I think it's essential. I think that talking to people, we have a supply chain now that goes across the world. Our customers are based across the U.S. We, the headquarters of the company, are in California, and we have offices in Phoenix and other places. And I think being able to talk to a diversity of people from around the world, think about things in different ways, solve problems. Everybody's got different ways of solving problems, and it's just narrow focused. And I think more interesting if you can. Life is more interesting if you can meet more people and do things. So I think. And finding that wherever you are. So whether we were just talking before we came on air about how you can access information from everywhere now, and so podcasts and everything are a great way of doing that.
Yes. All right. So let's shift gears a bit and let's talk more about your professional journey prior to XStream Trucking. I really enjoyed kind of our brief pre-show conversation, kind of getting a sense of where you've been and some of the big initiatives you've been part of. Tell us about that before your current role, before founding XStream Trucking. Where'd you spend your time?
Yeah, so I, as a high schooler, I was like, I've got to figure out how to make money. So I worked on marketing, like back in the early days of pay-per-click. So I did that. That paid my way through college, building websites and things, and that got me kind of into the startup bug because a lot of my clients were startups. So I was going to school in England, but I was working for companies in Seattle in my holidays and working them. So that gave me access to kind of like the idea that companies aren't things that have been around forever. They're small companies. You can try them. So that was the beginning. And then
so if I can butt in real quick. So how unique is it to work for a startup? Because I think if I heard you there, and I certainly in our pre-show, it helped fund your collegiate adventure, right? How meaningful and how impactful were those that exposure to startups, to becoming a startup entrepreneur yourself?
I mean, I think it was super important. So when I was growing up, my family was all about, we had a lot of healthcare people in our family. My mom was a nurse, a lot of academics, very little access to business. And and then having those experiences early on helped me think about businesses and the creativity and working with teams to solve problems. And that's what a small business is. It's like, we got a small problem, we've got an idea, we can do something better, something different, hopefully 10 times better, because otherwise it's hard to survive. And I think that was super important. And I would encourage people who are thinking about it, like, try and do some. You can do small amounts of work, consulting work for small companies, and they can't afford a full-time anything. And so you can go on Upwork or other things, or contact people directly, find some skill that you can do that they need help with. And so we've got freelancers who help us with Salesforce and web design and other things, and that's exactly what I did when I was young.
Upwork's a great platform, the one you mentioned there. In this gig economy, you can find some great talent, great contributors on there. All right, so you working for very several startups.
Yep. Kind
of paid your way through college, and then what?
Yep. So the college, and then when I graduated in 2009, which was a great time. I did my master's and finished my master's in 2009
at Stanford.
At Imperial. I went to Stanford a bit later. So I collected 2 masters because why not? Glutton for punishment. So I graduated in 2009, and I was like, wow, the world's falling apart. This is a great time to graduate. So I was like, probably not time to start a new venture. So I went in and worked for Oliver Wyman, did a lot of energy and retail consulting for them, a lot of data. And that's really where I think the earliest part of my career was all about getting small startup experience, and that was when I learned how to talk to Fortune 50 companies and build presentations and sales. I think both those experiences have been important to combine because some of our customers now are Fortune 50 companies, and I think that combining the consulting experience with that startup experience was important. So Oliver Wyman for 4 years, then went into investing, did venture capital in London for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity to do an MBA at Stanford.
Gosh, the only thing you hadn't done is rockets, and in terms of all things complex, rocket science is the only thing missing from your list.
Well, that was my hobby. Okay. So as a kid, I had you remember those little 3-stage rocket things, and then you lose them because they go too far and
hit a neighbor's house.
Never understood how they worked though, but they were fun.
All right, so gosh, and energy consulting. I mean, is that so part of your mission now? I don't want to jump too far ahead because I kind of want to hear about the genesis and the years that just preceded XStream Trucking, but now beyond generating fuel and maintenance savings to XStream Trucking's customers' bottom line, it's also about tackling harmful emissions.
Yeah,
is a lot of learnings when you were doing energy consulting. Is that what helped that noble mission kind of come to fruition in your mind?
Yeah. So my master's in physics was in climate modeling. And then then I spent the summer doing a research project building solar cells. And the problem with our solar cells were that they were damaged by oxygen. There's a lot of oxygen around. They were damaged by any kind of sunlight, which was problematic for a solar cell.
Interesting.
So those didn't go so far. But I really realized that technology and business was the way to solve that problem. Like I was thinking about doing more research, and I was like, let's go into business and find big businesses and help them improve their efficiencies to help them with their bottom lines. And that's what I learned in consulting. So it was, it was my way of tackling carbon emissions. And I think that was important in 2009. It's more important today as the story is clearer. But I think that the way to do that is through a what I call a NPV positive, a net present value positive project. Something that helps people today improve their business.
I love that. Okay, so after the consulting
Yep.
Space, after I think you said the investment, you spent some time in the investment space. Is that right?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
So you were very. I mean, as I think about kind of your unique journey, it's so crystal clear in my mind how these things kind of came together to really give you some great tailwinds into the startup community.
Yeah.
Right?
Tailwinds. Yeah. Don't know that's intentional, but tailwinds. Yeah. So we end up in aerodynamics. That's right. But it makes sense looking back on it. But at the time, I think all those cliches about being opportunistic, figuring out like people that that can help you get to the next thing is very important. So I wouldn't say it was a plan from the beginning. But it was actually back in my Imperial College days where the idea for XStream Trucking originally originated. It was on a road trip. Was driving and saw a lot of semis in the U.S. and we were at a truck stop.
Where were you going first off?
I was going down the coast.
Okay.
So down, my dad was living in Seattle, so I was going down to California and back up again. And we had a couple of Brits in the car with me, and so we were going to share driving. I woke up and we were driving on the wrong side of the road. And so I did the rest of the driving for the trip. I was like, you guys are not
root
driving
cause
again.
analysis.
Root cause analysis is like, I'm driving. So, and I was tired. So we were having a break at a truck stop, and I was having a nap, and the truck pulled up next to me, and he was idling his engine super loud, right? And I'd never really understood trucking or anything. So I knocked on his door, like, why are you idling? It's like, well, I live in my truck, and that provides my power, my air conditioning. And so the first thing I did was like, okay, wow, like this guy has to live with this loud engine. Like, can we design a small like generator to help him and reduce emissions? Because turning over a huge truck engine for air conditioning doesn't seem like the best way. I was too late. APUs were on their way and other things, but it got me interested in this field. And 3 million drivers in the U.S. And live in trucks, and I just got fascinated by the trucking industry, and that's where XStream Genesis came from, that road trip.
All right, so let's talk about when. So clearly you've been inspired. You've had some personal interactions that gave some early credence to the problems you're looking to solve. When did it start to really, become official? And talk about that, and talk about some of your earliest customers.
Yeah, so it was a project for a long time. I filed a patent, and I was living in England, working full time, and I was phoning America going, and they were hearing this British accent going, hey, let me tell you how to run trucks better. Turns out that wasn't a great way to get their attention.
Right.
So when I came over to Stanford and started living in America, I could then I actually used my idea to run through some of the classes. So I did some of the data analysis classes with data from trucking. I did some marketing classes with that. And so, one of the things we did was I got to sort of have a test bed for some of my ideas. And I was looking, and I think this is a really important point. If you're thinking about starting a company or an idea, look for the reason not to do it, right? And so what's the thing that would stop you doing it, and test that first. And I kept not finding a reason why not to do it. And so, and then in 2016 when I graduated, I did it first. And our first customer, fantastic fleet, driving team drivers, high mileage. They've been looking for a solution, and we built them a product. And they were like, I was like, this is going to be a prototype. We're gonna, but we will work with you. We will make sure that it works well for you, and we'll look after you. And they were fantastic to us.
All right, so let's talk about exactly what XStream Trucking does. We've kind of talked about the entrepreneurial journey, and now kind of from a not features and benefits, but kind of what it is, peeling the layers back. What is it? What does it do at the core? Yeah,
so Class 8 trucks, you got your tractor and your trailer, gap between the two, if you can imagine that. So that gap there has been there since the 60s, and it's designed to allow you to turn. And the thing I realized is you don't turn on the freeway. When you're going fast at 60 miles an hour, if you turn, you've got big problems, bigger than we can deal with. So what we do, and of course you don't want that gap, because what the gap does is air goes into the gap and We call it the black hole of aerodynamics, and it gets sucked in. And so what we do is we produce panels that when you go above 50 miles an hour, the panels fold out sides and top and create a smooth surface, and turns the truck into a bullet train. And when you're going fast, that's super important. That saves your fuel. When you're going slow, automatically we use pneumatics to pull those panels back in, and the gap is there again, and you can turn like you did before. So it's an aerodynamic product. It's the first active aerodynamic product for trucks, and it saves our fleet's customers a lot of fuel without changing how they drive. So the driver, it doesn't affect the driver.
Love it. I love it.
That's lucky.
So
I still love it too, which is also lucky. I have people who have startups and they're 2-3 years in and I don't know. No, I love it. It's great. It's great fun.
So and it's automatic.
Automatic, very important.
Yeah. So
the driver has 101,000 things to do, and they're tired. They're driving. If you have something which the driver needs to do something, one time in 1,000 he's going to get that wrong, and then there's a problem. So we have sensors. We have everything's automated.
I really love that. So let's talk about the benefits and because as my walking around sense, I've never driven a truck, but I'm thinking that saves gas efficiency, mileage.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
By making it more aerodynamic. Tell us about what's the return on it?
Yeah. So certainly closing the gap burns less fuel. That saves you money. The other thing is that, and this gets a little bit more technical, but you have these side extenders on the trucks already. You can have shorter ones, so you can actually have a bigger gap normally, which means you actually have less damage. So the other thing is having the truck able to have two different shapes, one for driving slowly, one for driving fast, enables you to have a bigger gap when you're driving slowly and reduce side extender damage. So there's two real things that we do for our fleets.
So we're cutting down maintenance time.
Cutting down maintenance.
Vessels.
And in current, it's hard right now to find drivers, and it's hard to find technicians. So our fleets really want something that reduces their labor costs.
So to our audience, we're chatting with Daniel Burrows, CEO and founder of XStream Trucking. Daniel, do you feel, based on the conversations you're having, the events you're at, the customers you're talking to, there's rightly so, there's a huge focus on the trucker shortage, right? However, what is equally as important but not nearly talked about enough and not nearly the same is the technicians and the maintenance, the mechanics and the folks that keep these engines and these big vehicles moving.
It is critical, and I think people. I think we need to, as a country, I think we need to have another think about how we're thinking about education and apprenticeships and opportunities for people to enter these well-paying, great jobs, steady jobs, and the fleets need more of these. And I think that we'll see more vocational work, and I think that's a fantastic thing for everyone. And we need them because we need them to install our truck wings. So.
Yes, that's right. Selfishly, well, let's shift over. I know that there is a sustainability play here as well, and I know that's baked into part of it seems like the culture and the DNA of the company, right? Speak more to that.
So we're careful about how we talk about this. So it's important to me. It may not be important to all our customers to the same extent, and that's okay. What we know that our customers have to drive their trucks and deliver freight to their customers, and they've got a bottom line which is often very narrow. So we're very clear. It saves carbon, and it's important to me, and it's important to many of my team, many members on my team. And it's important to some of our customers. It's not important to all of our customers because they've got their day-to-day, which they've got to get done.
Right.
And I think so. We talk about it when asked, but for our fleet customers, they're buying it because it saves them their bottom line. Fuel is a third of their cost. Drivers is about another third. So if you can make 5% savings on a third of their cost, and they're only making 2 pennies, profit, that can double their profits.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so as not just founder but also CEO of XStream Trucking, we always like to ask these leaders where do they spend their time, and then where is their favorite place, favorite activity they really like spending their time. What would be your answers to those two questions?
Well, I think So my role has changed over time.
Okay.
My role has changed over time. I think I still enjoy it the most when I get into product, when I'm, designing things, working with customers, solving problems. Like, what happens if, we want to put a spare tire here? It's like, yeah, we can design that. My engineers prefer it when I don't. so I'm becoming more disciplined over time. But I think making one of the things that you've got to do as CEO is trust your team, build a team, empower the team, and that's something that I'm growing at. I wouldn't say I've got the solution to, but I'm. So where do I spend my time? Today was a great day. I was at the TMC show in Atlanta. It's the big truck show. I was talking to many of the top truck fleets in the U.S. and talking to customers about their problems and how we could help them and where we fit into the puzzle, because everybody's got a lot on, and these shows are a fantastic way to talk about innovation.
And it seemed like in talking to pre-show, you saw a lot of light bulbs go off throughout some of these discussions you're having here in Atlanta.
Yeah. I mean, it's and some of these customers, we've seen them a couple of times. We've got trucks running with them, and then you catch up with them, and they're like, yes, we're going to expand that, and we're going to do more of these, and we're one of our early partners is UPS, and they have they've talked publicly about how we've been helping them with their trucks, and that's just been a fantastic partnership for us.
Wow, and I can only imagine how large their fleet is, and what a great for an early stage company to be working with an iconic brand like that, right?
I mean, it makes the world of difference for startups, and you've got to find people who believe in what you're doing, believe in you, and then you've got to return that favor. You've got to work really hard for them, because they're used to dealing with a company with 1,000 engineers and everything, and so you can make up for that by showing up and just making everything right for them. So
I'm going to kind of throw a curveball at you.
Yeah,
go
for it.
I think you it's right up your alley, and I'd love to get your take on this. So we've got a variety of friends of the show that are part of innovation centers here, there, and everywhere. And we had
we went through one of those, by the way.
Okay.
Innovation Center. Yeah.
Okay. Which one locally? Can you share?
Yeah, it was called it was called Radicand, and it was Stanford, and it just had a shop, and we built our first ones, and I'd raised like $50,000, and that was it. And we were building our first prototypes out of that shop, and it gave us access to space and materials. And without that sort of thing, I couldn't have done it. And so I think we're in an innovation center here, and I'm just looking around. It's exciting to see the little spaces and things, because innovation requires that space and that time to do stuff.
I completely
agree.
You. No. I think this is a perfect foreshadowing.
Yeah.
When we're talking about big global companies, and we're not picking on UPS at all, but just all that, there's so much interest in global, large Fortune 50, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies to work with these forward-looking ideas and products and services that come out of the startup space. A lot of entrepreneurs have told us, a lot of innovation centers, for that matter, have told us that these large companies don't always really know how to work with startups and early stage companies. Yep. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think you go there first. I think innovation in trucking, if you look at historically, people have tested on small fleets, gone sort of scaled up with large fleets, and then the best innovations have ended up as an OEM option. You buy it with your new, Freightliner or whatever you're buying. And so in that journey, we started off and we did our first, 1,000,000 miles of testing, not with the corporate fleets. And some of our backers were like, go to UPS. And I'm like, if we do, we will die, because they will expect a certain level that we are not at yet. So I think being realistic about where you are. And then so we did a lot of testing. We started off with aluminum panels. We moved to these high impact composite panels, and we upgraded our pneumatics. And we built a software stack and all of our things are IoT, because we've got a box that tracks every savings of every one. All that needs to be built. And I think if we built that under the burning glaze of a Fortune 50 company that, frankly, if they're spending time on something, it's got to move their needle somewhere, right? then I think that would have been really tough. I think we would have fallen over ourselves. So I think being careful if you're, do make sure that it's working and then go and get the scale and from a bigger company.
Good stuff. Okay, so now I want to broaden out a little bit, like we typically do. I'd love to get you to weigh in, Daniel, on when you look at the global business community, but the global supply chain community. So much is going on.
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it's an exciting time.
Yes, we could do interviews 24/7, not cover everything. What one or two issues or challenges or trends or developments, or you name it, are you tracking more than others right now?
Well, as we sit here in February 2020, and the coronavirus is sort of rearing its ugly head more. One thing that I've been thinking about is, and it's affected our supply chain in ways that I didn't expect, and it. It's because we have some components made in China. Most of our components are made in the U.S. But you look at our panels and they open and shut on a truck, and it looks like a pretty simple thing. And then you peel it back, and it's got electronics, it's got pneumatics, it's got a pneumatic control box, it's got composite materials, it's got composite tubes, it's got rivets, it's got hardware, it's got aluminum mounts. It's got all these different places, and we've got all these different suppliers. And I think that you see this more and more with this sort of like global supply chain, because we can, as a startup with half a guy on, well, we've got full-time supply chain people now, but when we started, we didn't. Well, we can source directly from China in a way that you couldn't for some components before. So what happens when something like a global interruption happens, and we do just-in-time manufacturing, so we keep our inventory low. Then something like this comes along, and suddenly that advantage, lower cost, higher quality because they're specialists, translates into a huge disadvantage on resilience. I think that when things are going well, it's hard to price in that resilience issue earlier on. So I don't know whether you've talked to other people about this, but I think thinking about how these global supply chains, just-in-time manufacturing, look great on the books, but they have these softer costs that are sort of hard to see from the beginning
until something
happens, and you're like, oh wow, I've got to, and so now we're scrambling to try and figure out how to catch up and solve those problems
along with the rest of the world, right?
Right,
especially
and you're going to see so Apple saying they're going to miss some shipping and other things.
We have talked a lot here at Supply Chain Now about the automotive industry, the high tech industry, where a couple of those industries hit early on, and a lot more news has come out about that. But we've also talked a lot about the ocean carriers. There was a report in Wall Street Journal just last week, I think it was. It'll be a couple weeks old by the time this podcast publishes. But 5 ocean carriers at the time are already letting their investors and the other folks know that they're preparing profit warnings. I'm not sure what the number is now, but about halfway through February, if you looked at sailings out of China from end of January 2020 to about mid-February, over 50 sailings had been canceled, and some ships had left ports in China 10% full.
Wow.
So that's basically ensures a loss for that company, right? Even if they make a stop in North America, on their way to Europe or wherever, it's still going to be a loss. And then, of course, what's taking place, some of the buildup in the ports, right? Some of the reefers that cannot get processed, because labor is still, just to get into these Chinese ports, a lot of labor, unfortunately, because there's a lot of families have been impacted. It's just despite the problem solving that is innate in the supply chain industry, this has just been a disaster.
Yeah, and we're working overtime to try and fix it.
Right.
But there's to get a new supplier vetted, trained, the quality established.
Right.
We're putting stuff on trucks. We've got to have.
Right.
We got to know what we're doing and what the materials are. It takes a long time, and I think that it's easier than ever to build a really complex supply chain. And that is not necessarily a good thing. Well,
there was a neat article. I'm not sure where. I always like to give people credit, but it was basically questioning if in light of what's taken place these last 2 months plus, if the globalization of supply chains is truly a good thing.
Right.
So we'll see how that debate evolves over the next, hopefully we get some good news that we've started to contain, at least from a human element standpoint. We it's like one day we get good news and the next day we get bad news. We'll see where that goes, but certainly our thoughts and prayers are with the families that are impacted.
Absolutely.
All right, so
working a bit harder is not nearly as bad as what they're facing over there. So I agree with that completely.
Good point.
And I think that the globalization supply chain, you asked, is it a good thing? Is it a good thing all the time, or is it a good thing in good times? Like when is it a good thing?
Right.
And so I think we are taking another hard look at. We've onshored all our aluminum work, and I think that we will continue to look at building more and more in America. And our product is certified made in America now.
So I know you're visiting Atlanta. What is home base for the company?
So we have offices in Phoenix, and then the HQ in Redwood City.
Okay. All right.
But like modern companies, we got people all over working from home. We do a lot of Zoom meetings, and we one of the things I like to do is empower people and let them do their work wherever they need to do it, around their family commitments and other things.
All right. So that I want to throw you one more curveball.
Go for it.
Because I'd love to pick your brain on what I want to get back to a couple other things we talked pre-show in terms of some other global supply chain topics that are kind of intriguing you. But a quick sidebar. As a leader and CEO and founder of a fastly growing startup early stage company, what have been some of your most critical lessons learned from a people and a team standpoint?
It's you learn continuously on this, and I think that it's one of the fun things about a company is that somebody once got into trouble saying companies are people, and I think whatever you think about whether you should have been in trouble, I think when you go to work, that's what you see. You don't see the articles in Delaware Incorporation. It's like who turns up on Monday and who answers the email when you call. Do you care about these people? And so it is all about people. And I think building that team, aligning them around the vision of what we're trying to do is key. So what have I learned? I've learned.
Sounds like flexibility, in terms of you mentioned empowering your workforce. We all work differently. We all work successfully and efficiently in many different ways, and it sounds like that is something. I could have this wrong. It sounds like that's something you and your leadership team have been very intentional about allowing or empowering.
Yeah, I mean, it helps us, right, having people across the country be closer to customers, and so in return, it gives our team more flexibility, and I'm great with that. I don't care where you are at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. What I care about is on Friday is the work done, and are we further along on our mission? And I think giving people back that power is a very humanizing thing that you can do as a startup. I think the other thing I've learned is how do you talk to somebody who's in a big company, who's thinking about going to a startup and doesn't know whether or not to do it. And startup, immediately has an emotional reaction to people. They're like, risk, danger, alarm bells. And talking to them about that and like how they should think about that risk and that risk for their family and whether that's the right thing for them to do right now. And a lot of people who've joined us have joined us from big companies where they had very safe, career paths, and they came to find a faster personal growth path, an opportunity to have a bigger impact. And what I say to them is like, we don't know where the startup goes. A lot of startups don't make it. But if you gain skills in the startup faster that you would not have gained elsewhere, say it all goes wrong. Say I'm wrong and this isn't the right way. And things are looking good right now. But say it. Just need to be very careful when I'm describing this. What I mean.
Sorry.
You will get a better job. You'll have more skills. You have more connections. You'll have grown as a person because I always say a year in a startup's worth 4 years in a big company.
I like that. I might steal that from you. And when I've been asked a very similar question, I think it's important and love to get you to weigh in. Startups aren't for everybody, and that's okay because we need people to drive these corporations. We need people to still farm, and we need people to drive trucks and do all these other things that aren't inherently startup-ish, right?
It's it's a bad idea for a lot of people.
Right.
Yeah. You've got to find what's right for you.
Right.
And I'll just pitch the startups over and over, but,
right.
but you should do what you want, what makes sense. But think about it. When you think about like what, and think about what's your why coming to work? What's your why?
Love that. Simon Sinek has really popularized that what your why is.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back, and thank you for accommodating my curveballs and sidebars. It's fascinating.
It's
I think that aspect, team, kind of how you develop your outlook on managing and hiring and nurturing. I think that's just an intriguing part of early stage life, startup life, as Greg White would say. Okay, let's get back to some of the general trends across global supply chain that are on your radar more than others. What else is out there that you're tracking?
So it's the other thing that I think I'm seeing as a trend is modern data science techniques that are changing how stuff is moving in a way that is tracked and part of everyday life. And so, I'm using my words carefully here because I think AI, big data, it's all buzzwordy, and I think that what you see is let's take a very specific example, which is truck wings, our product. Okay, yep. Previously aerodynamic products, you would have tested it, you would have put it out, and you would have said, okay, you're running roughly 100,000 miles per truck. This is your savings. That's not good enough anymore for these fleets. They need to know what is that piece of equipment doing. So we had to build a telematics device called Carbon Connect, which tells us what is the state of the wing. Is it open and shut? How many miles have you driven on that truck this week? And we send our customers a report, which is like truck A, B, C, D. You ran 50 miles or 700 miles, and you ran 92% open, and this is how much fuel you saved and so many dollars you saved. And that's been such an important sales tool, and I think that's new. I don't think that people used to buy equipment and make supply chain decisions with real-time data. Like all our units are calling home every minute, and we report that data back. And that data being embedded into decision-making processes. And when we go to a sales meeting now, the first thing we do is we pull the data from the trucks and let them know how their assets are running and where the problems are. And you wouldn't necessarily expect like a flaps on a truck to have that kind of data back end. And that's not, I'm using that example just because I'm native to it, but it's across, you're seeing that all over and over and over where data is now cheap, the cellular data is cheaper, and you can actually get sensors. My friend Josh runs a company called Aperia that does it's a really cool technology. It's wheel ends that as the wheel turns, it inflates the tire to the right pressure.
How about that?
It's really cool.
Yeah.
That now has a connectivity component. Didn't have for a while, and now they can tell you exactly what. So I think you're seeing that again and again, and I think that's a trend that will only continue as people can digest more data, and it's useful data as well. I think it's we don't send. It's a final point on this. We don't send like all the data in a raw format. We send, here are 3 trucks that need attention. Here's your top 5 truck savings, and here's your total savings for the week. So in 30 seconds. They get a health check.
It's like a dashboard.
Yeah, it's literally a dashboard, and they get a health check on their fleet, and they know where they need to spend their time and what's working, and what's not working, and
rather than information overload is what you need, the signals in the business.
Yeah. And I think that the ability for even small companies like us to build that sort of stuff is based on we work on it with a bunch of tools to put that together to deliver that to customers in a way that would have been impossible for a team of our size with our funding before.
I agree with you, and I hate to beat a dead horse, but I read, and this is dated, but this really stuck with me. It was one of my early observances that illustrates exactly what you're talking about. So LL Bean, everybody's had, a lot of folks here in the States, you might have had an LL Bean book bag growing up, right?
Yep, I have one. Yep.
Boots or jackets or you name it.
Please.
Yeah, that's right. This is a couple years old, but they incorporated sensors in their shoes and then I think also in their jackets or one of the pullovers to see how it was being used. And that is so fascinating to me because of the sheer amounts of shoes and jackets and being able to track that and have it communicate in a way that doesn't, I think what's key here, that doesn't disrupt or decrease the customer's experience, or it doesn't disrupt that, right?
Yeah.
While it can drive the data they're collecting, can drive innovation and better products. It's just a fascinating data world we live in.
Yeah, it is, and I think if you think about before now, a lot of it was around, can we collect the data, can we build the sensors, can we get the data into a database? And I just think more and more you're seeing the data now coming back out of these databases and onto a weekly report, a dashboard or something where you can actually make decisions on it in a way that makes sense. So it's a cliche to talk about,
right.
But I think you can point to lots of specific examples of small companies delivering data products in a way that just a hardware like a panels on a hard truck would not have done before.
Agreed. I think also I can remember 8, maybe 10 years ago when big data first became cliche. I think one of the challenges at the time is okay, now that I've got all this data and I paid all this money to accumulate it, what do we do?
Yeah.
Now that is for years now, for several years now, to your point, companies are acting in a very meaningful and intentional and productive and effective way on this data that's accumulated.
Well, eventually cliche becomes a truism, right? Like people talked about it a lot, and then now they're going to talk about it because it's just happening.
Right. Yeah. Right before our eyes. Okay. Anything else? I want to say we talked about electric trucking pre-show.
Yeah.
Any observations or anything that you want to share there? Is that I imagine it's on your radar, but what do you find fascinating about that?
Well, so you're seeing so trucking has two sort of major trends going on right now where people are exploring alternative fuels, whether that's natural gas, electric trucks, or high LNG, and still majority of the market, 98% is diesel. And then, and the second one is autonomy. And so, Waymo's got their autonomous trucks, and there are other startups there. Both those trends, are super fascinating. And so, electric trucks, trucking is really important because it's not so much about the cost per mile anymore. It's about, can you go 5% further? Can you put on batteries that are 5% less heavy? And so, that's a really important thing. And I think as we look at like where this is going, I don't know how fast electric trucks will come. I mean, we see a lot of electric cars on the road, but still trucks go a lot further, much harder to build that. But you're seeing NACFE, North American Council of Freight Efficiency, has this amazing initiative around electric trucks, and if people are interested in that, I'd check that out.
Yeah, that'd be great. Maybe we can include it as a show note.
Yeah,
we can grab the link from you. That I haven't ever thought about from an electric trucking standpoint, how solutions like what y'all have basically allows more deliveries or more driving distance or more miles or what have you. And I would imagine, and I am completely ignorant, so tell me if I'm way off base here, but I imagine with these large batteries, they already have to be kind of conservative, so you don't have a truck sitting there on the highway. So there's already some kind of safety net plugged in. So when you're talking about being able to extend that based on these savings, I mean, it can really make an impact quick.
Yeah, no, it can, and you talk about range anxiety on passenger cars. Range anxiety, right? I think that with electric trucks, it's range terror.
Yes,
because like passenger cars, you can get to and from work if you're a reasonable distance away with a passenger car. These truck drivers are driving, with their hours of service as much as they can, right? And they don't want to spend time recharging. They don't want to spend time. They definitely don't get stranded and be towed. So I think it's range terror, but they're getting there. It's not, and CNG technology is a fantastic. We just announced a partnership with Agility, one of the biggest CNG providers, where our truck wings now installed at factory for them.
Nice.
So for CNG trucks, compressed natural gas trucks, many people think that has much more volume right now than electric, and people think that that's going to be a bigger thing than electric for a while.
What a great partnership to kick off here first quarter 2020.
Yeah, we're excited. We just announced that, so we're working hard, and we're just one of the things that gets me up every day is that this whole industry is so vibrant. Everything's changing, and being part of that is a lot of fun.
Love it. I can tell.
Yeah.
You emanate it. So that's a great thing.
I apologize. Hopefully I didn't get too much of it all over you.
I know. I think, entrepreneur, startup, I think that is contagious.
Yeah.
And I would imagine in your team meetings when y'all huddle or you name it, I mean, I think that just is like a force multiplier. So hope to have you come back on and give us an update maybe later this year. But welcome. Yeah, enjoy your time in Atlanta. I think you've got another day or two. Sounds like you're at a great event and had some positive conversations, constructive conversations. So enjoy. Let's make sure before we wrap up the interview here, how can folks learn more about XStream Trucking, and also how can they connect with you?
Yeah, so we are XStreamTrucking.com. So when you pick a company name, entrepreneur, it's really important that when you say the name, people can type it in.
Right.
So you cannot type it in from what I've said. So we're working on that. But it's a letter X, stream as an airstream. So STREAM trucking.com. XStreamTrucking.com. And there's we have our Twitter handle and our LinkedIn, and people can reach out to me through. We check all those, and they'll find me online.
Outstanding. Daniel Burrows, CEO and founder, XStream Trucking. Really have enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate your, when you sit down with many CEOs, sometimes they can kind of be guarded, but really appreciate your kind of just genuine conversation, thoughts on the business, thoughts on the industry. I find it very refreshing, so appreciate your time here today.
Well, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thanks so much.
You
appreciate
bet.
it.
All right, so to our audience, hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation with Daniel as much as I have. Be sure to check out our events and webinar tabs on supplychainnowradio.com. We have a variety of in-person and virtual events coming up with partners around the world, from EFT Reuters Events to the Automotive Industry Action Group, Georgia Logistics Summit, Resilience 360, Modex. And if you can't find something you're looking for, if you have a question, shoot our CMO a note, Amanda at supplychainnowradio.com. Or, much like XStream Trucking, you can also hit us up on Twitter. You can find me at Scott W. Luton, and we'd love to engage there. Big thanks to our guests here today. Once again, Daniel Burrows, CEO and founder, XStream Trucking. Be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. On behalf of our entire team here, Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we'll see you next time on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.